Let's return now to local politics, not as chaotic right now as South Korea. Joining me, Eamon Fitzpatrick and David Gazard, our regular Wednesday panel. Gentlemen, great to see you both. David, you've worked for, you worked for the nation's longest-serving treasurer, Peter Costello. What's your read on where we are, both in an economic sense with the GDP number, but how that flows through to the politics with an election just around the corner, David?
Well, it's hard to see these numbers today as anything other than confirming that there's been anaemic growth. And at the same time, we've still got inflationary pressures that are high. And the opposition has started to seize on the fact that the government is actually working against itself with these numbers. Spending is at record levels. Borrowing is extremely high. So the government, while it's hoping for an interest rate cut, is actually driving up the cost of money by competing in the market for that money. So on one hand, the Treasurer is saying we need an interest rate cut, but on the other hand, he's saying we're putting all this new spending into the economy that's driving up interest rates. So it's catch-22 for the government. I don't think it's sustainable.
Eamon Fitzpatrick, your read on this number. You heard what Jim Chalmers had to say on this program and in his news conference. Is that the soft landing that he'd been hoping for?
Well, I actually was lucky to spend a bit of time with Jim Chalmers yesterday. He is pretty realistic about the state of the world. And as he says, we are not immune to the pressures that everyone else faces. So I think he's been pretty realistic. I think his management of the budget and of the economy, as far as government has that impact, has been first rate. There's no doubt about that. You look at his track record and the point he makes, look at his predecessors. That was a shocking decade. Let's never forget that. The key here now, it is going to come down to messaging. It's going to come down to what resonates with whom. People are doing it tough. Australia is an incredibly, unique economy that way, because when you go to an airport and you get a flight, the flights are full. People are in the shops. There's no doubt about that. But everybody feels the same pressures, the pressures at home. And that's really what this is going to come down to, is who do you trust to look after you? And there is a clear delineation, I think, that's happening between what the opposition's done previously and what this government has done to date. I think the other really important thing now is it's going to come down to being able to prove what you say. All we've had from the opposition is a lot of promises, a lot of rhetoric, and little behind it. You just look at their nuclear plan as an incredible example of that.
David Gazard, it's going to be an important few months with what the RBA does do in February, March, April next year, but also, importantly, how the coalition lands that central nuclear policy, which looks like it will be the big ticket item and the only one that the coalition will take to the election.
Yeah, well, Eamon nominates, global pressures and global trends. The world is moving to nuclear. That's point number one. The Western world is going to nuclear. So Peter Dutton will outline, the cost of the opposition's plans for nuclear. But the other is this, right? Australia is doing it worse than the rest of the world when it comes to standard of living for Australians. Our interest rates are higher. Our inflation is higher. The notion that Eamon is running that somehow people are going to reverse their long-held position that the coalition is not better on managing the economy and is going to continue to put its faith in Jim Chalmers and Anthony Albanese is belied by decades of numbers that show exactly the opposite. The coalition always has an equity lead on managing the economy and managing security. So the idea that after one of the most punishing periods for the household budget, people are going to say that the coalition that it always does better on economic management is a risk to the economy, I think is completely fanciful.
Yeah, so Eamon, given that point that David said there, and given incumbents have been really under pressure around the world at the moment because of all those inflationary issues and pressures that, as you rightly pointed out, have been felt right around the world or in large parts of the world, this is not an easy electoral cycle for the Labor government, first term or otherwise.
These days, Kieran, no electoral cycle is easy. Nobody takes anything for granted. I think the interesting thing that Gaz says here is basically it's going to come down to perception versus fact. Yes, the coalition have traditionally had that lead, but we live in really volatile times in every electorate. We've seen that around the world. Things turn on a dime, and they often do right now. So I think the next few months is going to be very, very tricky, and it's going to be all to play for. And I think people do pay close attention to what's going on. And I think they are going to want some real answers and some real detail about what is being offered as the alternative. They haven't seen that. All they know is there's some secret nuclear plan that's going to cost 70, 80, 90, 100 billion. Nobody knows. But there's a reason why Peter Dutton has deliberately held off from releasing that and pushing it as far back as he can in the year, because he doesn't want to be called to account for that or anything else. I mean, this has just become a debate around performance, stats, and coalition rhetoric and empty quotes, basically.
Eamon Fitzpatrick, David Gazard, gentlemen, great to see you both. Talk to you soon.